What's going on, everybody, and welcome in to this edition of Cards Hub 365. I'm Brenden Schaeffer, joined by the voice on the Cardinals radio network. You know him, you love him, Mike Claiborne. Claibs, how are you today
I'm
after another
good.
day at Jupiter?
I'm good, man. A little brisk today, a little chilly, but overall, everyone had a chance to get their work in. And as we get closer and closer to the first game of the season, so I'm getting kind of pumped a little bit because, as you well know, I've seen enough rounds of catch in my lifetime, so I'm ready to see some guys facing a team in a different uniform. So it's going to be fun.
Claibs is one of those guys that you get excited when the games actually begin and we can start to learn a little bit more about these players rather than some of the action that goes on the backfields. I love the backfield stuff, but it can be very difficult to contextualize what you're seeing back on those fields because of a variety of reasons, right?
There's no question. And I think you have to take it with a grain of salt because there's a lot going on. I mean, you can be on one field and something else is going on another field. And again, they're facing each other. Pitchers are trying to see what a hitter's reaction is on a pitch. Hitters are trying to see where it's coming out of his hand for a reaction as well. So there's still a lot of fact finding. But when they're facing another team, they may do that early in the spring. But, you get midway through, guys are bearing down. They have their timing down a little bit better, and it makes for a better game. Now, the one drawback when you have spring training games, and this is why the pitch clock has been so much of a factor. When you start having guys that come in and they can't throw strikes, it can make a long afternoon. It can make 2 innings seem like 2 hours. And that's my only concern, especially early because guys are nervous. They've come up from AA or whatever. And it's not what you call a clean game.
No, it's not. It's one of those things that you got to contextualize. You got to be able to see what you're seeing and get it into the ballpark setting, I think, is a lot more favorable for everybody. However, there was some activity that went on the backfields this afternoon. I want to start with you, Claibs, asking about Tink Hence. He's a prospect that Cardinals fans have heard about for a number of years after he was drafted back in the COVID draft of 2020. But when he was drafted, he was coming out of high school. And so it was natural that there would be a bit of a ramp-up time as he got acclimated and got bigger, stronger, all of those things. But last year was a season for Tink where I think everybody said coming in, this is the year where he needs to ramp up, maybe throw some more innings to be able to find that durability to become a big league starter. Unfortunately, had some more injury issues last year. I'm curious coming into this spring camp, kind of how you view Tink Hence with where he is in his progression.
I think his mindset is one of which that he's going to fight through it. Pitchers, we have to be careful with them. But in his case, I think he's learned a lot. Physically, he's much more developed. I think they list him at 175. I bet he's pushing closer to 185. And he's worked on his pitches. He's very comfortable with throwing certain pitches. And I just think he just wants to go out and pitch. Now, the coin toss is bullpen starter. I think I'm starting him as a starter. I'm going to leave him in a rotation somewhere for as long as I can. Now, does that mean he can transition to a bullpen guy? Well, perhaps. But I'm of the belief that the Cardinals down the road need to start looking at starters, developing starters. I mean, Sonny Gray has one more year. Miles Michaelis is done after this year. Steven Matz, we don't know what his future looks like as far as 3 veterans. So I'm of the belief that it's time to really kind of transition the McGreevy's, perhaps Schaeffer, and certainly Tink Hence and Chase, the young man, the lefty, Quinn
Mathews.
Quinn Mathews is a guy that we have to throw in that equation, because they're next.
Yeah.
And I just think when we keep thinking bullpen, moving men gradually, maybe that works. That was kind of what Palante did. But Palante had to basically get out of line and learn how to start as a pitcher again. And I don't know if you have that kind of time. Yeah, Tink Hence, as you mentioned, taken out of high school, he's still a fairly young man. But at some point, it's time to take that next step where I'm saying Tink Hence has to be in the conversation of being on the cusp of a September call-up. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be, but I think he needs to be on that path where when it comes down to them making a decision on who they're going to bring up, his name has to be in that conversation, barring any injury.
And I think he can pitch his way into that this year. His numbers, Claibs, were good last season when he was healthy. He had a 2.7 ERA at AA Springfield. Feels like the progression for him could be to start the season in the Memphis rotation, but has not reached 100 professional innings in a given season. I think that's got to be the next step, is just being able to, like you said, fight through some of those things. They've wanted to be very careful, but could this be a year where you say training wheels come off? Can he pitch a little deeper into the games and we can see what he can really do?
I agree with you. And I think that's going to be maybe a league-wide unofficial mandate. Let's see if we can get these guys to go longer and maybe not throw as hard. And there's enough data now that supports the fact the harder you throw, the sooner you're going to get hurt. And so maybe guys like Tink Hence, who will show you a good heater but has other pitches that he's been effective with, maybe that's the reason why he finds himself pitching 120 innings, maybe 130, something along that line. And when you do that, that certainly gives you an opportunity to be scrutinized more as a starter compared to just another long relief guy.
Cody mentions Tink's got to stay healthy and throw over 100 innings this year if he wants to be a starter. That's really kind of the base level thing for Tink Hence coming into this season. But what's great about him is you don't question the stuff. He's been effective when he's been able to be out there. So we'll see the way the Cardinals want to handle that. But you mentioned a couple of the other names like Gordon Graceffo. It feels like he could be a name that gets into the bullpen conversation if the Cardinals want to cycle through. Like, let's just say a McGreevy is the first man up for whatever may happen in the rotation, right? Always somebody's going to go
I think McGreevy's in your rotation. I think you sink or swim with him no matter what.
Do you think that
at the expense of who? I don't know.
And that was going to be the next question. Like, Steven Matz's spot seems a little bit interesting. He's been a durability guy too, where the innings they've gotten from him have been acceptable at times over the course of his contract, but just has not been able to stay healthy. I wonder if there's a world in which McGreevy just really impresses this camp, if bullpen would be a consideration for Matz, or if they sort of defer to his veteran status and say, we'll leave him in the rotation as long as he's healthy, and how that kind of might play out.
Yeah, I think at some point you have to plant a flag on certain people and stay with the process. You're going to take into account that he may have a bump in the road somewhere along the way. But if he's going to be a guy that you're going to pin your hopes on, you got to let him go out there and just pitch. And, going back to our previous texter with regard to Tink, it's amazing how 100 innings is kind of it used to be 100 innings. Oh, I can get that no matter what. Now it seems like, okay, that's certainly the floor for you being a big league pitcher. But I remember 100 innings, guys would do that and not even break a sweat. So, we kind of scale back our expectations, which in this day and age, everybody's trying to protect their assets. But at someplace, sometime, you have to have a guy say, you know what, I'm not going to look at the innings. You look at the innings. I'm going to look at my performance. I'm going to look at how many guys I can get out. I'm going to look at how many guys I can get out with the least amount of pitches. Things of that nature, I think, or the elements that pitchers need to really think about more than innings. Let somebody else read the innings. You just go out and pitch. And if you do that'll take care of a lot of concern.
Yeah, the Cardinals can be the team that says, hey, wherever Tink is getting up close to that number, that we don't want to advance from 80 innings and have him vault right away to 140, 150. They're going to be the ones that can kind of make that determination. And as long as Tink, I think, is focused on the right things when he's going out there, the innings conversation is maybe one that can kind of resolve itself based on his performance, honestly.
Yeah, but you know what, Brenden, here's the thing about that. And again, we go back to, for lack of a better term, babying guys. Tink Hence isn't 17 years old. Okay. His body is developed enough to be able to endure that workload and then some. Now, if he's just coming out of high school and he's trying to bulk up and physically get himself to that point, I'd say, okay, I can see where you're going as far as his pitch count and things of that nature. I get it. But I think this guy's is as grown of a man as a grown man can be. Now, there may be a little bit more room for physical development, but from a pitching standpoint, what are you waiting for? Turn him loose and see what he has. And his body will let you know. He'll let you know when he may want to back off. And I think when I say that, we can't always go by what his velocity says. Well, he's been throwing 94, now he's throwing 92.5. Okay, but what is he doing with his breaking ball? How effective is he with swing and miss where he takes a little bit off? That's the art of pitching. It's not rear back and just try and throw through the wall and then say that swing and miss stuff. No, there are other ways you get people out. And so if he's learning and developing other methods and how to get people out with the fewest amount of pitches, then I think mission accomplished, where he can continue to pitch until maybe he has a tired arm. And, one of the things you used to do with a tired arm is pitch through it. So, the theory on how you develop pitchers continues to change, but it sounds like there are some who feel like we got to bring it back to something that's more manageable and more realistic and probably better for both future player and team.
I could absolutely see that. And our producer, Matt Rocchio, mentions that he's got a poll up right now on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to vote in this. What is the best future for Tink Hence? Is it as a starter or as that reliever, maybe even a future closer mold? And a lot of our audience, Claibs, I think sees it the way we do, keeping him in the rotation and seeing whether he can make it and last as a starter. 74% of the vote right now agreeing with that concept. And I think that's right. Unless a guy proves to you that he can't do it, I think it would be to the benefit of the player and the team to take that guy who was highly drafted and say, hey, we can stick with this and try and make this work as he progresses through the system.
Well, and you know what? Of the 74%, I'm going to say 94% of the 74% have probably never even seen Tink Hence pitch.
That's a very strong possibility.
And they hear you talking, they hear me talking, they read your work. We see him here in spring training. I don't get a chance to go to Springfield. I can watch him, online.
Right.
But in those situations, and we talked about scouting the other day, when they show you highlights, they're showing you highlights of him striking this guy out or getting a double play ball. They don't show you when somebody, turns one around on him or what his body language looks like and how he pitches out of trouble. That's the other thing. You have to have a guy who has learned how to pitch out of trouble, which was fascinating for me in watching Paul Skeens and how the Cardinals last season probably hit Skeens as well as anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the problems was with Skeens, he was never in any trouble in most games until he faced the Cardinals. Now he's got runners on first. He's got a runner in third. He's got this situation, that situation. And the Cardinals were very patient in their approach to him. And he learned a valuable lesson because the next times around against the other opponents, he was pretty effective when that situation presented itself again.
In a moment, we're going to talk about Cooper Jerpy. I know we've got a few questions about him and Quinn Mathews, but I want to mention real quick that a big part of what we'll be doing here at Sports Hub STL is being live when it's time to react. That means post-game shows for every local team. Last night, I joined Kareem Rush, and we started.
That was good last night. That was fun.
Claims that was a lot of fun, and Mizzou
scored 110 points didn't hurt you either, so I had something to talk about.
I don't think we could have had a better start to our post-game shows on Sports Hub STL. So you can go back and listen to that right now if you want to. I'd wait till we're done.
Well, I'd wait till we were done, and then you.
And Saturday's going to be a big day. All 5 teams in action, and we'll have post-game shows for all of them. Cardinals' first spring training game that'll end around 3:00. You got SLU versus Rhode Island at 3:30. The Blues play the Jets in the evening time around 8:30. Mizzou at Arkansas around 9, and even Claibs STL City will be in action as well. So at Sports Hub STL is where you'll find us on all the social media spots. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss anything going on Saturday. Post-game coverage on Sports Hub STL is brought to you by Hot Shots, St. Louis's home for all the games all the time since 1990. Find yours at hotshotsnet.com. Cooper Jerpy, have you gotten to see a lot of him as of yet, Claibs, the lefty with a pretty interesting delivery?
I've seen him throw a bullpen. I've not seen him really face hitters yet. I watched him last year here in the spring, and he does have a very unique delivery. For the old timers, it kind of reminds you of a right-handed Ted Abernathy, who was a submariner. He was so good they used to call him Ted Abernasty. And he finished his tour of duty with the Cardinals. But his is a little bit more deliberate. And I think he's a guy that, as a hitter, you're not going to see a lot of guys like that. So the question for a hitter is, what are you looking for? Are you looking for his hips? Or are you looking for where his release point is, and with it being aligned with something behind him? I mean, there are a lot of things that go into it where he can be, his delivery is a distraction. Throw in the fact that he has some pretty good movement on his pitches is not only a distraction, it's a head scratcher as far as how to hit this guy. And are you patient? Are you moving up in the box? You know, there's so many things that when you see a guy like that, he can have you messed up for a week. I remember when the Negro brothers were really good, and there was some pitchers or some hitters that wouldn't face the Negros. I remember in '82 in the World Series, the playoffs, they had Phil Negro, and George Hendrick was like, man, if I play against this guy, I'll be messed up for the rest of the series. And fortunately, we had a rainout, and and George didn't have a chance to face him. But those kind of guys who you don't see on a regular basis, they can pose problems. But I think when you look at these guys today, with all the information and all the video, it may be easier to break a guy like this down compared to yesteryear, where you were just hearing, the only information you had was the guy who had just struck out coming back to the dugout telling you what he has, compared to you saying, okay, now I can kind of pick him up. I know where to pick him up at. Technology really will put Cooper Jerkby on the firing line early with regard to him being able to adjust to what hitters see.
And Claibs, we got a comment talking about Quinn Mathews and saying he's not somebody the Cardinals have, for lack of a better phrase, babied. He was a guy who threw a ton of ball in college, and he was the one that had the 156 pitch game, the complete game when he was with Stanford, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And comes in, they didn't have him throw professionally just after the draft, but this past season, obviously going from A-ball all the way up to AAA, they said this is a guy we believe to be durable. We're going to give him a shot. You Mama asks, how much of it is them babying some guys versus are the Cardinals trying to slow play some of this to keep them under team control? I don't really think it's that.
No,
I think it's more the progression that they want for each individual player, whether it's Mathews or Jerpy, can be different from player to player.
Yeah, that doesn't work with this situation with the Cardinals. Teams have held guys back to a certain date where the clock doesn't start to tick as far as their arbitration time. I just think with Mathews, because again, he's a college guy, and I kind of liken legitimate Division I college to a good AA setup. And so, this is an area where he's probably further along than some other guys who have come out of high school and maybe don't have the innings on their arms like he does. I think they're going to give him a little bit more runway space just to see how far he can go. And they'll tap him on the shoulder and say, okay, that's enough. We've seen enough. Because I also wonder, when you think about a Quinn Mathews, and, the Cardinals have slow played some guys and then they've fast tracked some as well. Where does he fit in, and how many levels will he ascend to? And he's running out of levels as far as the minor leagues are concerned. So what level do you plug him in and have the support around him, having a competent catcher who's on the track as well, having some veterans who've been around the minors for a little bit, and having those coaches and those rovers that come in and get a new fresh set of eyes on them. I think you have a handful of guys in your organization that you really want to pay closer attention to and kind of put them in a separate category on their pace and ascension to the big leagues compared to the other guys, and say, well, he needs more seasoning. He needs more at bats. He needs more innings. And there is certainly nothing wrong with that. But when you have a young man who has kind of stepped forward like we've seen, and it's a very small sample size, but when you see that, you say, okay, well, maybe we don't want to put the term special on him, but certainly worthy of closer observation.
There was another writer who was telling me they were watching Quinn's session this afternoon on the backfields. He was one of the guys throwing live BP, and there was maybe a borderline call that he thought didn't go his way, and it kind of got him into a, kind of that pissed off mentality. Next batter that he faced, strike one, strike two, strike three, kind of has that edge about him where in a moment where he's like, "Yeah, this didn't go my way. I'm going to try to pick it up from there and make the next guy pay for it." He's like, for a guy you said, small sample. We haven't seen a ton yet of Quinn Mathews, and I think the way he's going to start this next season will most likely be in that AAA rotation, continuing to get some seasoning at that level. It's really the only level that he struggled at last year, Claibs, and was just there briefly at the end of the season. But that kind of edge and competitive mentality, all these guys out here have to be competitive, but I kind of like hearing stories like that about these young players as we kind of get our eyes on them and get to know them for the first time.
Yeah, it's good that guys want to compete, and some guys wear their emotions on their sleeve. I'm of the thinking, and we're going to get to this here in a second, about the ABS and the challenge, where guys get so caught up in that vacuum, they're going to grouse about a pitch in the second inning, they thought they should have had, compared to a situation where maybe there's runners on base and you want to get that pitch. The other thing about Quinn Mathews, I want to watch him pitch out of trouble.
Right.
I want to see what he looks like when maybe he doesn't have A+ stuff that day, but he has to find a way to get to 6 innings or 7 innings, and how he manages to do that without his A+ stuff. Because most guys will tell you, coming out of a bullpen for a game, if you have 30 starts, there's some guys that say, "Man, I only felt good like 3 or 4 times. The other times I just had to figure it out." So that's the element you also want to see with Quinn Mathews and McGreevy, Tink Hence, all these young pitchers. We want to see that side of them too.
No doubt about it. And you mentioned it, the ABS challenge system. It's something that's coming to these parks in spring training, and we'll talk about it in just a moment. But I want to let everybody know to mark your calendars for the night of Thursday, February 27th, for the Sports Hub STL kickoff party. The event will take place at the new Hot Shots on Lindbergh in Lime. Come out and meet the Sports Hub STL team and enjoy great food and drink specials. The party will start at 6 as the Blues drop the puck on the road against Washington, and we'll watch the game together, have great prize giveaways, and the Blues Hub postgame show will broadcast live on site immediately following the game. Again, that's Thursday night, February 27th, starting at 6 p.m. at the new Hot Shots on Lindbergh in Lime. Hot Shots, St. Louis is home for all the games all the time since 1990. Find yours at hotshotsnet.com. So, title of this video, Claibs, as we're doing it here today, does a challenge system make more sense than just going to the strictly robot umpires, which is something that, some fans have talked about maybe they need to do in the future, because we've seen umpiring kind of have its issues at times. But what is your take on this challenge system that they're looking to employ now? And we're going to see it coming up in some of these Grapefruit League games where the batters, if they don't agree with the call, the batters can say, "Hey, tap the helmet. That's a challenge. I think that one was a missed call by the umpire." And within a matter of moments, we'll know the answer. What's your take on maybe introducing this as they're doing?
I'm glad that they're trying to get it right. And I'm kind of stuck in between, because the challenge system, it's only going to happen 4 or 5 times in a game, perhaps. And I think the biggest challenge of the challenge system is that player, be it hitter or pitcher, who wants the challenge, because they're the only ones they can call for. And you have some pitchers who never thought they've ever thrown a ball, and you have some hitters who've never swung at a strike. It's one of those things that you have to take the ego and that determination out of the factor and think about the team, about, is this a good time to challenge? So that's one more thing on a pitcher's plate and on a hitter's plate when they step on the mound, and certainly in the batter's box. And when is it effective? Now, on the other side of that coin, you have the ABS, where they will tell you it's a ball or a strike. I thought that would be detrimental to pitchers, because you have pitchers who have such good stuff that may miss the strike zone, but it's close enough that, when you size it up and you say, well, you just missed by an inch or two, but that's a pitch that's designed not to be in the strike zone. It gives the hitter the advantage of knowing, well, the ABS is going to call an area I cover, compared to me worrying about chasing a slider that looks so good, I'm going to chase it, and, he gets himself out. So we're going to try this. The ballpark here at Roger Dean Stadium is wired for it. Not every ballpark is. And so we'll see it firsthand come Saturday on who will be the first person to challenge. So I'll ask you, you've seen enough hitters. You've seen enough pitchers. Who's going to challenge first?
We asked Ollie Marmol a little bit about it, and we got the answer of we're having those conversations as a staff, and we're going to talk to the players about it. But and this is a spring game, so it's not like it's one of those where, you better save it for the 7th inning and there's runners in scoring position, and you're going to need to wait to use it in those spots because you only get 2. If you keep being correct about it, you can keep challenging. But if you get one wrong, you lose that challenge for the rest of the game. And so that's what I'm intrigued by. We know the starters will probably only play about half the game, take a couple at bats, Mike. So I wonder if we do get one of the guys early on, like a Lars Nootbaar, if he's batting up in the batting order, does he kind of break it out at some point? Wilson.
Yeah, I would think Newt would be a prime candidate.
Yeah,
to raise his hand, because apparently, Nuke's never been in a situation where everything he swings at is a legitimate strike, and everything he doesn't swing at is definitely a ball. And I'm going to if we had to pull names out of a hat, I'm going with Newt being the first one to do this.
Newt was the name that came to mind for me off the top.
Yeah. And some people say, quit whining. Other guys are saying, hey, look, I'm just grinding. I'm just trying to make sure I get a good pitch. And then you have others who just want to see what the limit is with regard to, what is the size of the plate today? And so it's a learning process. And I'll be interested to know how many conversations the team has, internally, and then also the conversations Ollie and Brant Brown have with individuals on, okay, here's a situation. This is what this guy has. Look for this. Remember, you have a challenge, but and when do you call for the challenge? I just think that it's just a new dynamic of the game. And I know some people, as we see Nathan, who feels like this challenge, it goes against the fundamentals of baseball. And if you're an old school person, I certainly understand. And I know there was some who fought the pitch clock. Oh, how could you do that in this beautiful game? Yeah, but you're not there for 3 hours every night watching guys scratch themselves and do all the other stuff.
The media feels different about the pitch clock, I think.
Yeah. As I've said before, it might be the greatest invention of the 21st century other than Spanx.
Well, we'll see if they feel that way about challenging balls and strikes. I just like it, too, because you mentioned hitters are always going to have their opinion on, and pitchers, too, on whether these borderline calls should have gone their direction or not. And now we'll at least get an opportunity to see it. But I was wondering that, too. With only a couple per game, does the staff say, and it's not like you're going to have time to look at the manager and have him, sign off on it. It's got to be instantaneous that the player has got to call for it. So there can't be that collaboration. That collaboration has to come before the game, maybe even before the season. Obviously, this is just spring we're talking about. It's not due to be implemented in MLB just yet, but maybe at some point it will be. And this is the way that they're testing it out. They've done so in the minors last year. I think you could get some fun entertainment from this, Claibs, when a guy is just so certain that he's right, and then the system says, nope, that was a call that was pretty good.
And then you go in the dugout and see for yourself. Yeah, I kicked that one. The other element that goes into this is I'm going to talk to my minor league guys who've seen this work. I'm going to talk to Ben Johnson, the manager in Memphis, and see what their approach was and see how we can add or subtract from that approach. And this is a plus for the Cardinals. A lot of guys on this team have gone through it, in their minor league career. So they kind of have an idea. They may have to be refreshed a little bit on how it works at this level, but it's something that's going to take some time. I'm wondering, to the letter of the law, and it really is black and white. It's really cut and dried with regard to whether you can or whether you can't. But man, this is a reaction sport. And, when a guy thinks he's looking for a slider and they throw him a changeup that he wasn't looking for, and now all of a sudden he feels embarrassed or he feels like he's been had because that wasn't the pitch he anticipated on swinging at, it's going to take some real teeth grinding for some of these players not to push the button in favor of saving their own valor.
And I think could be some interest in a player uses it, and then his teammates saying, hey,
what the hell are you doing?
You're wasting our challenge out here on a pitch that was perfectly
You
suitable.
weren't going to hit that pitch anyway, so what do you so it's going to be fun. And for everyone else, we want to remind them, Brenden, that today MLB, every player is measured.
Right.
And that's going to be the strike zone, your measurements, and they'll all be entered into the system. So I think that'll be a more accurate approach compared to your stance. It's going to be your measurements. And also, for those who will watch the games on TV, and I hear a few people do from time to time, the K zone or the strike zone, we see the box has been altered to be more accurate, because you've heard this countless times. The setup isn't the same in every ballpark. The camera angle is not the same. Busch Stadium was one of the few that was as close to being accurate as it was, but now they've been able to calibrate everything and make sure that there's a lot more accuracy to this. And how that plays out will be interesting also, because umpires for years would tell you, well, that's really not the strike zone we have. And Joe West was very adamant about it when he was umpiring, and certainly after he retired, that he thought umpires were getting the raw deal. Because while we want to climb up their back, Brenden, they get it right more times than I think some people want to give them credit for. And I think we have to take that into account. This is their job. And much like a player, they're going to have an off night. But you know what? They're better with their job from an accuracy standpoint than a lot of players are.
Yeah, when we don't notice them, it's because they're probably doing it right. And rarely do we then go out and praise the umpires for having a well-called game. But again, this is just like another check and balance on that system that I think ends up being pretty interesting as far as how players, and I was asking Ollie about it a little bit this morning. You talk about the measurements for these guys. 27% of the player's height, that's going to be due to be the bottom of the zone. 53.5% of the player's height, again, that's standing height. That's not Jeff Bagwell getting down into his stance and
this ain't Pete Rose in a crouch. Yeah, you're right.
Manipulating the strike zone in a way. You won't be able to do that with this, but will the umpires still be calling it in such a way that's more accustomed to those smaller strike zones, to where you might get that high-low strike? I think on the corners, it's going to be what it is. The high-low, Claibs, has a chance to be really interesting with different players, and based on their batting stances, how often is it going to line up with what the umpire is already calling?
Yeah, I agree with you. The league has been very adamant about making sure they get out in front on this and giving the broadcasters a lot of information to support it with statistics and things of that nature. And I'm good with it. I'm good to see how this works. I mean, they've obviously experimented at the lower levels, and there's going to be some guys kicking and screaming. Don't worry, that's just their nature. And I would say by mid-May, this thing will be just another element of the game, unless something grossly goes wrong. And I mean, I'm sure they prepare for the worst, but from everything I've seen, it looks like this is something that might move in a positive direction. Now, the question is, with the challenges, it doesn't take away that much as far as the pace of the game, because I think hitters will be swinging more. They'll be putting the ball in play more. So it's something I'm looking forward to.
And I think like 17 seconds is the average time of these reviews in the minors, and some comments like Nathan saying, the strike zone should be malleable. It should change. And that's part of and Claibs, you get to know the umpires and know what guys and players certainly do, what guys have a bigger zone and things like that. I still think there's going to be an element of that in the game. And so it'll be interesting to see how much this ultimately changes things. We did put J.J. Wetherholt's name, Claibs, in the title of the video because he's a guy fans love to hear from, and I got to see him take a few swings today. But before we talk JJ, I want to let everybody know to make sure you have signed up for the Sports Hub STL newsletter. You'll get all the latest content from the Hub sent to your inbox twice a week. Plus, anytime news breaks about the local sports teams, it'll be in there. You'll be the first to know about Sports Hub STL events as well as new merchandise. And while you're on the site, take a look around at all the St. Louis sports content, including recaps of daily programming, sports news, opinions, and more. Plus, if you like a little action on the games, Eric Sontag will have pregame betting analysis for every team that we cover here on Sports Hub STL. Eric also hosts Domesticated Gamblers, and that show airs live here on our YouTube page on Fridays at noon. And, of course, All of our programming is available on demand as soon as we are finished with the live shows. It's all on the website at sportshubstl.com. So, Claibs, we tried to caution folks a little bit yesterday when it comes to J.J. Wetherholt, who was just drafted last year, but as you mentioned, has had high-level Division I opportunities with West Virginia, and so already might be a little bit advanced compared to some guys coming out of the draft. Folks are wondering, how soon can this guy get to St. Louis? Well, at least today, he was getting to face some guys who maybe we will see someone like a Nick Anderson in St. Louis. And I happened to see Claibs JJ rope a double. I say a double. He didn't run the bases, but had a line drive off the opposite field wall that was pretty impressive. He was taking some good swings out there today. It is somebody that I know Cardinals fans are going to kind of light up every time they get a chance to hear his name because of how high he was drafted and the pedigree that he comes along with.
Yeah, I think the draft position is something for this generation of Cardinal fans they haven't seen. And they think maybe that puts him on a faster track to get to the big show. And they're right. It should be. But with that comes a little time and just getting himself acclimated to what the big leagues looks like, or just professional baseball looks like. And then we have to find a position for him. I don't know whether you notice we have a shortstop. We have more second basemen than we can swing a dead cat at. And we have a third baseman. We have 2 third basemen as we speak. So we've got to find a place for him to play on a regular basis. And until that position comes up, and remember, there's Thomas Ajaysi, who everyone thinks is the second coming, that, we have to wait and see if he's a good player or not. So it's a little bit of a crowd in the middle of the infield right now. And that's a good pipeline to have, I would think. But, I'm going to give JJ as much time as he needs to get himself here, because I'm of the belief once you're here, the key is not getting here. The key is staying here. And nobody wants to be on the shuttle back and forth to Memphis. You want to be here and be a contributor every day.
Could be a big summer for JJ as he might see a couple different levels and continues to work his way towards St. Louis, but patience will be a virtue, I think, when it comes to that. We will end on this one, Claibs. A question from Henry.
Yeah.
This Cardinals team can contend in the weak division. Nolan coming back. People are still maybe kind of counting out the Cardinals. Henry's a believer, Claibs, that this could be a team that shocks people. That's a word that Brenden Donovan has used. He thinks his team could shock people. Ollie Marmol believing similar things. What are your thoughts on that question?
Well, I'm trying to determine what a weak division is. This division may be more balanced. Where are they going to have a 110-win team? Probably not. Are they going to have a team that's going to lose 90 games? Yep. And if you look around, every division is going to have a 90-game loser somewhere. I think the key here is the competition from within. And we can go down a list, and I think virtually every team in this division has made a legitimate improvement to their team. And, you look at Milwaukee, that may be a team that you may say, well, wait a minute, you lost Devin Williams, you lose Adames, you're going to move a couple of people around, and, and they're young in some areas, and then there's Christian Yelich's back. So I can understand if you feel like that's not a team. I think Pittsburgh, having a Paul Skeens and those other young pitchers that had a full season.
Jared Jones.
Keller,
they got some dudes.
Mitch Keller is a guy that, I hope we miss him because Keller comes out and he pours it on.
He does.
So you have that situation where you think they're going to be improved. I think that the key is for them, can Key Brian Hayes stay healthy? And what kind of outfielder is O'Neal Cruz going to be? I can tell you this, he's going to be held accountable because between Tommy Pham and Andrew McCutchen and some other guys, they're going to show him how this is supposed to be at the big league level. So I think Pittsburgh's going to be better. I think with Terry Francona, he probably makes them 10 wins better, minimum. And they have some very good arms in their rotation. And as we see firsthand, we go to Cincinnati, that ballpark is not nice to visiting teams. Then you have the Cardinals and the Cubs. The Cubs are better. Their pitching is better than it was last year. They seem like they have a set lineup. They have Nico Horner, who I think is one of the most underrated players in the game.
Yes.
That they can keep him out there. And as long as Happ is in the lineup against the Cardinals, Ian Happ is going to kill somebody in a Redbird uniform. It's just his nature. And it doesn't make a difference who the pitcher is, who the manager is, or who's whatever. As long as there's a Cardinal uniform out there, he's going to find a way to do damage. So I just think that they've all become better, but because they don't have that dynamic team in a division like the Dodgers or Philadelphia or the Mets with their significant payrolls, that doesn't mean they don't put on a good brand of baseball. And I kind of liken the Cardinals division to what we see in the American League Central, and that was a very good division that nobody talked about. And they had 2 teams get in the postseason. So I wouldn't say it's a weak division. I think it's a more competitive division from top to bottom compared to the National League West, where you have the Dodgers, you have the Padres and the Diamondbacks, and everybody else is trying to figure out, where they can find a chair when the music stops. And every division has it like that, with the exception of the American League East, where they're stacked from top to bottom. There's no weak sister in that division. And they may not have a 100-win team because they play each other enough where they'll be competitive against each other. So I always remind people, don't look at the record overall. I mean, obviously, you win 100 games, you've done something well. But I think you have to look at what you do in your division and then how you fare out of your division, because those games when you cross over and play other teams that you don't see a lot, I think that's a better indicator on how good you are.
And something else about this Central, Claibs, and obviously we'll see how teams are different and changed compared to last year. I don't think there's a White Sox in this division. You made the comp to the AL Central.
No.
I don't know who offhand is going to be like, quote unquote, the worst team in the Central in the National League, because even you mentioned the Reds, like a Hunter Green, they've got some arms that are going to sneak up on you. And you mentioned the new manager. There's not a team in this division that I can just look at on paper and say, oh, they're really going to have a hard time. It's probably whoever suffers the most injuries and has some of those types of issues happen in their rotation and in some of the key spots. But I do think top to bottom, maybe not a true World Series contender in the division. We'll see the way it shakes out. But I would agree, like it's balanced in a way that's going to keep the Cardinals honest too. Like we might be high on what this team could do and guys taking a step forward, but there's not going to be, and even with the more balanced schedule too, those games where historically, you get the Pirates for 18 games and you're really going to be able to load up. You got to take those games
do that anymore.
Seriously within division. It's not going to be the same at all.
You can't. And, while we sit here and talk, we haven't seen one pitch thrown yet.
That's right.
But I will say my feeling in what I've seen, I feel better in the direction of definitely being over 500. I feel better about contending for the division. To say we're going to win the World Series, I've learned this firsthand. All you have to do is get in, and what the next question you ask is, why not us? Now, a lot of things have to happen. You have to stay healthy. You have to get something out of someone you weren't expecting. But things can happen. But if this team gets off on the right foot, because you talked about it, they have pitching. They have enough pitching. If they hit, who knows what happens? And that's why we play the whole season. So a lot going on, and I'm looking forward to it getting started on Saturday.
Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll continue bringing the Cards Hub 365 show every afternoon. The schedule could change a little bit surrounding the games. Just be ready after you're done listening to the ball game to head on over to the Sports Hub STL channel over the weekend, because we'll be doing our kind of a post-game version of the show on those days, given the schedule changes. But stick with us all year long. It's going to be a lot of fun as we break down Cardinals baseball on a daily basis. Claibs, appreciate you for hopping on again with me today. Tomorrow, I think we're having our first call to the bullpen, if I'm not mistaken, with Joe Rod and Ryan.
We're deep. Our bullpen is as deep as anybody's.
That's right. We've got a good roster here, so make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Make sure to check out Randy and Brooke with their show at 10 a.m. on weekdays. And again, get ready for Saturday, because with all those teams in action locally, the YouTube channel for Sports Hub STL is going to be the place to go. But for Mike Claiborne of the Cardinals Radio Network, I'm Brenden Schaeffer saying so long for now.